The war room was cold. It was always cold on the Dominion's throne world. The Verk liked it that way. Cold kept the mind sharp. Cold reminded them that comfort was for the weak. High Commander Vrath stood at the center of the circular chamber. Around him, dozens of senior officers sat in their curved seats, their dark eyes fixed on the holographic display floating up the table. It showed a small blue planet, far out on the edge of explored space. Unremarkable, quiet, alone. This, said Vrath, tapping the image with one long gray finger, is called Earth. No one in the room had heard of it before. That was not surprising. Verk Dominion had conquered 43 civilizations across 3,000 years. Most of the species they had defeated had names that no one remembered anymore. This new one would be the same. Single planet, said the intelligence officer, reading from his tablet. 1 star, 1 moon. The species calls itself Homo sapiens, common name humans. He paused. They have no scannic ability. Their biology is extremely fragile. They breathe a simple oxygen-nitrogen mixture. Their bones break easily. They bleed. They age fast and die young. He set the tablet down. They are also deeply divided among themselves. Our long-range probes picked up thousands of active conflicts on the surface. They fight each other almost constantly. A few officers laughed quietly. One of them, a broad-shouldered general named Drath, leaned back in his seat and shook his head. They fight each other. We are here to discuss a species that cannot even unify itself. They are sitting on a planet rich with rare minerals, said Vrath. Processing value alone would supply 3 Dominion fleets for a decade. That is why we are here. He looked around the room, not because they are a threat, because they are a resource. Most of the room nodded. This was familiar. This was normal. Find a species, assess it, break it, use it. The Virk had done this so many times that it felt routine, like checking the weather before a walk. There was one voice that did not agree. It came from the far end of the table, from a young officer seated almost out of sight. His name was Sewell. He was not old. He was not decorated. He had no famous battles behind his name. But he had been assigned to the Deep Intelligence Division for 6 years, and in that time he had read more about more species than anyone else in the room. He raised his hand. Permission to speak. High Commander. Vrath looked at him. Speak. Sewell stood slowly. He pulled up a secondary display beside the main one. It showed charts, graphs, and long columns of data. I have reviewed all intelligence gathered on the humans over the past 2 years, he said. Most of it confirms what was just presented. They are physically weak. They are divided. Their technology is far behind ours. He paused. But there is something in this data that concerns me. Drath rolled his eyes. Get to it, Junior. Sewell ignored him. Every other species we have assessed showed a clear survival threshold. When losses reach a certain point, they stop, they surrender, they retreat, they break. He pointed to the human data. The humans do not appear to have that threshold. I have reviewed every major conflict in their recorded history. When they are losing, they do not stop. They adapt. When they are almost destroyed, they come back stronger. There is one particular period in their history, approximately 80 of their years ago, where 2 of their largest nations nearly destroyed each other using weapons of mass fire and explosive force. The destruction was enormous. Tens of millions died, and within a single generation, both nations had rebuilt, rearmed, and developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. The room was quiet for a moment. Then General Wrath laughed. They nearly destroyed themselves, and you are worried about them. I am worried about what they did after. Sewell said. They looked at the weapons. That almost ended them, and they built more better ones. They did not learn fear, they learned engineering. Wrath studied the young officer for a long moment, then he looked back at the blue planet on the display. You are telling me that a species with no psionic ability, fragile bodies, and a history of fighting itself is somehow a threat to the Third Claw Fleet? I am telling you that I do not think we understand them yet, Sewell said. Carefully, I am asking for more time, more observation. I want to study how they respond to external threat, not just internal conflict. We do not have more time, said Wrath. The mineral yield window is now. The Third Claw Fleet is already staged. He looked at Sewell with something that was not quite contempt, but was close to it. File your concerns in the standard report. They will be reviewed after the planet is secured. Sewell sat down. He did not argue further. There was no point. He had said what he needed to say. The rest was out of his hands. 3 days later, the Third Claw Fleet received its orders. It was a force of 68 warships built for overwhelming power. The flagship alone was larger than some moons. Its weapons could crack continental plates. Its shields had never been broken in live combat. The fleet had been used 11 times in the Dominion's history. Every time the target had fallen within days. The fleet's commander, an experienced officer named Vorath, reviewed the intelligence report on the humans with mild boredom. He had read worse. He had faced worse. He gave the order to jump and poured himself a warm drink while his officers prepared. Meanwhile, on the planet Earth, something strange happened. A monitoring station in low orbit, one of dozens of human-built satellites, picked up the gravitational signature of the Varak fleet emerging from jump space. At the edge of the solar system, the signal was flagged automatically. Within minutes, it reached a military command center in a large northern city. Within an hour, it had reached heads of state on 3 continents. Within 6 hours, every major human government on the planet had been briefed. They had never seen a ship like the ones on the long-range scans. They had never seen 68 of anything arrive together from outside their solar system. They did not know what it meant, but they knew enough. A single broadcast was prepared and sent outward, aimed at the incoming fleet. The message was translated into 17 different signal frequencies, covering every communication band the humans had ever detected from deep space. It said, identify yourselves and state your intentions. You have 48 hours. On the bridge of the Varak flagship, the message was received and translated by the ship's language AI. Vorath read it. He read it again, then he set it aside and did not reply. The 48 hours passed. No answer came from the Verk fleet. The humans sent a second message. It was shorter. It said, we will defend ourselves. Vorath did not read the second message. He had already given the order to advance. The Third Claw Fleet moved toward Earth, like a storm moving toward a candle. On The throne world, the High Commander. Watched the jump confirmation light up on the strategic map and turned away, already thinking about where the minerals would be stored, already counting the yield. No one was watching Sul, who sat alone in his office long after the war room had emptied, staring at one specific line in his report. He had highlighted it and circled it and come back to it a dozen times. It was a single sentence pulled from a human historical text, translated clumsily by the Dominion's AI, but still perfectly clear. We have never lost a war we decided to finish. Sul turned off his screen and sat in the dark for a very long time. 3 snorts weeks passed. The third Claw fleet did not report back. At first, no one on the throne world thought much of it. Communications across deep space were not always clean. Signal delays happened. Relay stations sometimes drifted out of alignment. The Dominion had 68 of its finest warships out there. What could possibly go wrong? The first flag was raised by a low-level signals officer named Preth, who worked the night rotation in the deep relay station on the Dominion's outer ring. She had been monitoring the Sol system channel for the standard victory broadcast, the automated confirmation that a planet had been pacified and resource processing had begun. It always came in 11 previous deployments of the Third Claw Fleet. It had always come within 4 days. On day 22, Preth filed a quiet report. No signal, no confirmation, no distress code, nothing. The report sat on a supervisor's desk for 2 more days before it was read. When it finally reached the senior command staff, the first reaction was irritation. Someone had clearly failed to send the broadcast. Vareth was a capable commander, but not known for his paperwork. A correction order was sent to the fleet. No reply came. Now the irritation turned into something else. It had no name yet. It sat in the stomachs of the senior staff like a stone that had not been there the day before. The Dominion sent a direct priority channel ping, the kind reserved for emergencies. It burned through relay interference and background noise. It was the loudest signal the Dominion's network could produce. Silence. Sewell was in his office when the alert came through his screen. He did not run to the war room. He walked slowly, the way a person walks when they already know what they are going to find and are not in a hurry to see it. The room was tense when he arrived. Officers were standing instead of sitting. Vrath was at the center display, his expression flat in the way that meant he was controlling something he did not want anyone to see. There is no communication failure, Sewell said before anyone asked him anything. The relay network is functioning. The signal is clean. There is simply nothing coming back. That is not possible, said General Drath. He said it firmly, the way people say things when they want them to be true. Send the probe cluster, Sewell said. The probe cluster was a group of small, fast unmanned ships designed for exactly this situation: rapid reconnaissance in areas where communication had broken down. They were not armed. They were not meant to fight. They were meant to look, record, and return. 20 probes were sent towards Sol. 19 days later, one came back. Just one. Its hull was partially melted on one side as if it had passed through something extremely hot at close range. The memory core was damaged, not destroyed but fractured. The technical team worked through the night to recover What they could. What they pulled from the core was shown. In the war room the following morning, every senior officer was present. The room was standing room only. Even people who had not been invited found reasons to be there. The footage was not clean. It was fragmented, jumping in and out, skipping seconds and sometimes whole minutes, but what it showed was enough. The Third Claw Fleet, 68 warships, the most powerful mobile force in the Dominion's Western Theater, was in pieces, not simply destroyed, not just broken apart in battle. The wreckage floated in a wide field around Earth's orbit, and moving through that wreckage were small figures in suits. Human figures. They crawled over the destroyed Verk ships with tools in their hands. They cut into hull panels. They pulled out components. They worked in teams, passing pieces to each other, loading things onto small transport craft. One figure had a device clipped to its wrist and appeared to be taking measurements of a Verk plasma cannon, while another figure held a light steady. They were not looting, they were studying. The footage skipped. When it resumed, the angle had changed. The probe had drifted closer to Earth before its core had been damaged. Down on the surface, through the cloud layer, there were lights, enormous clusters of lights, spreading across areas that had previously been empty land, construction sites, factories. Whatever the humans were building, they had started fast, and they were not stopping. The war room was completely silent. Sewell watched the footage without blinking. He had already seen it twice. In the technical bay, before the official viewing, he watched the others watching. He saw the moment the silence in the room changed from the silence of attention to the silence of fear. Vroth spoke first. How long ago did this happen? Based on the probe's flight time and the state of the wreckage in the footage, said the lead technical analyst, the fleet was destroyed approximately 25 to 30 days ago. 30 days. The humans had destroyed the Third Claw Fleet and spent the following 30 days pulling it apart and building new things with the pieces. They have our technology, said a senior weapons officer, his voice flat. They are reverse engineering our weapon systems in real time. Not in real time, Sewell said quietly. In less time. Our engineers take months to fully understand a new weapon system. The humans started disassembly during the battle and appear to have progressed to component-level analysis within days. He gestured at the frozen frame, showing the figure with the measuring device. That is not desperation. That is a method. They do this. They have always done this. How did they destroy 68 warships? Droth asked. His voice was different. Now not the confident rolling voice from the War Council, smaller. Yet, Sewell said, the probe didn't capture the battle itself, only the aftermath. He paused. But look at what they built in 30 days. Now imagine what they built in the days before the fleet arrived. That sat in the room like smoke. Vrath turned away from the display. He walked to the window at the far end of the room, which looked out over the glittering capital city. He was quiet for a long time. When he turned back, his face was unreadable. Sewell, he said, full threat assessment, every resource you need. I want it on my desk in 7 days. I started it 22 days ago, Sewell said. It will be ready tomorrow. No one laughed. No one made a comment about the young officer overstepping. The room was too quiet for that. As the officers filed out, Sewell stayed Behind, he looked at the frozen footage. One more time, the human figure with the measuring device, calm hands steady. Movements, a destroyed alien warship. Around them, and they were working like. It was just another day in a workshop. There was one more thing in the recovered footage that he had not mentioned in the briefing. He had decided to leave it out, not because it was unimportant, but because he was not sure the room could handle it. Alongside everything else, in the bottom right corner of one frame, barely visible, another human figure was sitting on a piece of wreckage in the silence of space. It appeared to be eating something from a small container. It was looking out at the stars, not at the battle damage around it, not at the alien ship it was sitting on. At the stars, as if it was already thinking about what came next. Sewell's report was 47 pages long. The first page had no numbers, no charts, and no strategic analysis. It had a single sentence. Vrath read it 3 times before he moved on. Everything we believed about this species was wrong. The report went through human history. From the beginning, Sewell had spent months collecting translated fragments. Their books, their records, their own accounts of what they had survived. He had organized it not as a military file, but as a story. He wanted whoever read it to feel the weight of it, not just see the data. He wrote about their early ages when they had nothing but sharpened stone and fire, about how they had spread across an entire planet on foot, adapting to every climate, every terrain, every condition, about how they had faced diseases that killed half their population and come back, about how two of their largest nations had once aimed weapons at each other, weapons powerful enough to end all life on the planet. And it stood in that position for decades without blinking. Neither side had fired. Not because they were afraid, because they were calculating, waiting, watching. Sewell wrote, "This species has lived at the edge of its own extinction multiple times. It does not break under that pressure, it hardens." He wrote about their wars. The Verk had wars too, but their wars were clean. One force defeated another. The losing side surrendered. The Verk did not fight wars the way the humans did, with civilian factories running day and night, entire populations redirected toward a single military goal: children learning to repair machines before they learned anything else. The humans had a word for it. They called it total war. The concept had no real translation in the Verk language, because the Verk had never needed to do it. No enemy had ever pushed them hard enough. The humans had pushed themselves that hard voluntarily against each other. Sewell wrote, "They practiced total war on themselves for generations before we arrived. We are not their first apocalypse, we are their latest problem." He submitted the report. He waited. On the 3rd day after submission, he was called to the high commander's personal chamber. It was not a meeting room, it was not a war room, it was a private space, which meant this conversation was not being recorded. Rath sat behind a wide desk. The report was open in front of him, heavily marked. He looked older than the last time Sewell had seen him up close. "You believe we cannot win this?" Rath said. "It was not a question. I believe we cannot win this the way we are planning to win it," Sewell said. "We are treating them like every other species. They are not like every other species. No species is invincible." "No," Sewell agreed, "but some species cost more to fight than they are worth. The humans know we are coming now. They Have our weapons, they have our hull. Designs, they have spent 30 days. Building things we have not seen yet. Every day we wait, they learn more. Every day we wait, they build more. He paused. I would like to recommend a communication approach. Open a channel. Talk to them before. No, said Wrath. The word was flat and final. The high commander closed the report and set it aside. He stood and walked to the window, the same way he had in the war room. It seemed to be something he did when he needed a moment to decide. Something he had already decided. I will not negotiate with a species that destroyed 68 of our ships, he said. Quietly, every civilization in this quadrant is watching. If we open a channel now, we look weak. If we look weak, we invite challenges from species that currently stay quiet because they fear us. He turned. We send the war singers. Sewell had been afraid of this. He kept his face still. The war singers are for civilizations that have proven themselves dangerous. The humans have proven themselves dangerous. Sewell could not argue with that. The war singers were not soldiers. The word soldier was too ordinary. They snorts were something the Dominion had created centuries ago during a war that had nearly ended the Empire, a war against a species that had fought without fear, without limit, without asking for mercy. The Dominion had decided after that war that they would never be caught unprepared again. 12 individuals had been selected, altered and trained over the course of decades. Each of them was stronger, faster and more durable than any natural-born Verk. Each of them had been in the field for over a century. Each of them had personally ended civilizations. Not fleets, not armies, but civilizations. The kind of beings who could walk into a command structure and take it apart from the inside, who could survive conditions that killed everything else, who could think and adapt in the middle of chaos. They had been used 3 times. 3 times the target had fallen. They were called in now. They arrived at the throne world from their separate postings across the Empire. Some came alone, some brought small squads of personal guards. They gathered in the deep briefing chamber below the war room, 12 figures in a room built for 400, and they made the room feel full. Their leader, or at least the one who spoke most often, was named Keth. His title was Keth the Silencer, a name he had earned on a cold world at the edge of the Empire's eastern border, where he had ended a 3-year war in 11 days by walking alone into the enemy's capital and not leaving until the war was over. No one asked exactly what had happened. Inside, the survivors had all said the same thing. He had simply talked to them. Whatever he had said, they had never fought again. Keth was not large by various standards. He was calm. He had gray eyes that moved slowly around a room, registering everything, resting on nothing for too long. He read Sewell's report in full. He was the only one of the 12 who did. After the briefing, as the others dispersed to prepare, Keth found Sewell standing in the corridor outside. Your report, Keth said, the part about their psychological threshold. You believe they do not have one. I believe we have not found it yet, Sewell said carefully. Keth looked at him for a moment. Every species has a breaking point. Yes, said Sewell, but the humans seem to break in the wrong direction. Instead of breaking apart, they break open. Every time they are hit hard enough to destroy another species, they expand. They grow, they become something larger than they were before. Keth was quiet, he seemed to be thinking, rather than dismissing, which Sewell found both encouraging and frightening. You think we should not go, Keth said. I think you will not come back the same way you are leaving, Sewell said. I do not know what you will find there, I do not think anyone does. Keth nodded slowly, as if filing that away, then he walked down the corridor and did not look back. The Obliteration Armada, 200 warships, was already being assembled at the staging grounds. The orders were simple. The war singers would deploy to the surface and eliminate the human military command. Once that was done, the Armada would burn the planet from orbit. No minerals, no processing, no yield. Just removal. Sewell stood on the observation deck and watched the Armada begin its formation. 200 ships catching the light of the throne world star, beautiful in the way that very dangerous things are sometimes beautiful. He thought about the humans sitting on the wreckage in space looking at the stars. He thought about the 47 pages he had written and the one sentence no one had spoken aloud in any of the briefings. The one he had pulled from a human military history text translated by the Dominion's language AI into something blunt and simple. They fight best when their backs are against the wall. The Armada jumped, and somewhere far across the dark, small blue planet waited full of people who had been backed against walls before. The Obliteration Armada dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Sol system and found nothing waiting for them. No human ships, no defenses, no response on any channel. Fleet Admiral Gren, commanding the Armada from the lead ship, scanned the area and found only empty space. He noted it in the log with mild satisfaction. The humans had heard they were coming and they had run. That was the normal response. That was what all species did eventually when they understood what was in front of them. He ordered the advance. They moved inward through the solar system in standard formation, a wide triangle, the largest ships at the front, the support vessels behind. They passed the outer planets without incident. The silence continued. It lasted exactly until they crossed the orbit of the fourth planet. Then everything happened at once. The first wave came from below the plane of the solar system, human ships, hundreds of them, rising up from angles that the Armada's targeting systems had not been tracking. They were not the same kind of ships the humans had launched against the third Claw fleet. These were different, heavier. The hulls were a mixture of human design and something else, angular sections that looked familiar to anyone who had studied Verk warship architecture, but changed, rebuilt, improved. The humans had taken the wreckage of 68 Verk warships and they had not just copied the designs, they had fixed the weaknesses. The second wave came from behind the largest moon, where a full strike group had been holding position in the moon's electromagnetic shadow, invisible to standard sensors. They hit the rear of the Armada before the formation had even finished reacting to the first wave. The third wave came from nowhere, small, fast ships that seemed to drop in from short micro jumps, tiny calculated leaps across distances of a few thousand kilometers. The Verk did not use micro jumps. Technology was theoretically possible, but considered too unstable for practical use. The humans had apparently decided the instability was acceptable Admiral Gren was shouting orders. His bridge was full of noise and light. Damage reports were coming in from across the fleet before the first minute of contact had passed. This was not what he had expected. He had expected scared ships running in desperate directions. Instead, the human fleet was moving in patterns, coordinated, fast, sharing information across all vessels simultaneously. When one ship found a weakness in a Verk shield configuration, every human ship within range adjusted to exploit the same weakness within seconds, as if they were not individual ships but parts of a single thinking thing. The battle lasted 11 days. Not 11 minutes, not 11 hours, 11 days of continuous fighting across the entire inner solar system. The Verk Armada was larger and its individual ships were more powerful. The humans were faster, smarter in formation, and they were fighting over their home. They knew every asteroid, every shadow, every gravitational current between the planets, and they did not stop. Verk ships with a human vessel and move on, and 20 minutes later that same vessel would have rerouted power from non-essential systems and be back in the fight. Human crews repaired damage in conditions that no Verk engineer would have called survivable. On one recorded occasion, a human ship took a direct hit that destroyed its main engine and half its hull, and its crew sealed off the damaged sections, shifted to emergency thrust, and rammed the attacking Verk ship deliberately, not from desperation, from calculation. The angle and force of the impact destroyed the Verk ship's weapons array and gave the surrounding human ships a clear firing window. They traded their ship for an advantage, knowingly, on purpose. That moment passed through the Verk command channel like a cold wind. Officers who had seen it on their tactical screens went quiet in a way they did not fully understand. On the fourth day, the war singers deployed. They came down in 12 separate drop pods, scattering across different points on Earth's surface. The plan was for each of them to hit a different command center, eliminate the local military leadership, and collapse the human command structure from 12 directions at once. It had worked on other worlds. It had worked every time before. The humans were ready. They had not known exactly where the war singers would land, but they had known the war singers were coming. Soul's report, had they ever seen it, would have seemed almost familiar to them, because they had already written their own version of it about the Verk. They had been studying the Dominion since the first probe footage had appeared, and they had learned one thing clearly: the war singers were the worst option, which meant the war singers were the most likely option. So they had prepared for them, not by building something stronger. They had nothing stronger to build. They prepared by thinking differently. Each war singer landed in a zone that was not defended by a single military unit, but by dozens of small, independent groups, each with its own command, each operating without central orders. If one group was destroyed, it did not send a signal of failure back up a chain. Each group simply fought until it could not, and the next group took over. There was no head to cut off. The body kept moving without it. The war singers had never faced this. They were trained to find the center and remove it. There was no center. They fell one by one across 10 days of ground fighting, not quickly, not easily. Each one was extraordinary, and each one cost the humans dearly. The ground was not cheap to hold. Human Soldiers died in numbers that would have broken other species 3 times over. They held. On the 9th day, one war singer, a female named Voss, was surrounded by a human unit in a burned city and offered a choice: surrender and be treated with respect, or continue and be brought down the hard way. Voss looked at the humans around her. Tired faces, torn equipment, eyes that had clearly not slept in days, and she laughed. She thought it was a performance. She chose to continue. The hard way took 4 hours and cost them 31 soldiers. They were still standing at the end of it. Voss was not. By day 11, 10 of the 12 war singers were gone. One had been lost at sea after a coastal engagement. One had been buried under a deliberately collapsed structure. The others had been brought down by sheer refusal, not by weapons alone, but by humans who simply would not stop. Only Kath remained. He had done more damage than the other 11 combined. 3 human command centers were rubble. 2 cities had been evacuated ahead of his path, but on the evening of the 11th day, he found himself standing in a ruined courtyard, surrounded on all sides with a single human officer walking toward him. The officer was tall, tired, and bleeding from a cut above one eye. She stopped about 10 m away and looked at him with no fear that he could detect. Just focus. It's over, she said. Kath looked around. Hundreds of human soldiers, weapons trained on him. He was injured, not badly, but enough. He assessed the situation the way he had been trained to do, and for the first time in over a century of combat, the assessment came back with one clear result. You don't want to kill me, she continued, and I'm not going to waste more of my people on you, so here is what happens. You leave, you go back to your people, and you bring them a message. Kath looked at her for a long time. What message? She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small sealed cylinder. She set it on the ground between them. That one. He looked at the cylinder. He looked at her. He picked it up. Then he walked through the line of soldiers, and they let him pass, and he did not look back. Above the planet, the remains of the obliteration armada, less than a third of what had arrived 11 days ago, were already pulling back. The human fleet pressed them to the edge of the system and stopped there, holding position, not pursuing, not chasing, watching. Kath reached his extraction point and waited for a Verk ship to collect him. He sat in the silence of a ruined building and turned the cylinder over his hands. He thought about what the human officer had said, not just the words, but the way she had said them, not with hatred, not with triumph, with something that sounded almost like exhaustion, like she had not wanted any of this, and now that it was ending, she just wanted it to be over. He had been in 100 wars. He had never met an enemy who looked at him like that. The ship came. He was taken aboard. Cylinder was in his pocket. He did not open it. That was not his right. He sat in a small room as the ship jumped toward the throne world. And for the first time in more than a century, Keth the Silencer found that he had nothing left to say. The throne world had never been quiet like this. Not quiet in the way of peace, quiet in the way of a held breath, the kind of quiet that happens when a very large, very old thing begins to understand that it has made a mistake it cannot simply undo. Keth arrived without announcement, no ceremony, no escort. He walked off the Ship under his own power, refusing the medical officers who met him at the dock. His injuries were visible, but he carried himself the way he always had. Straight, slow, deliberate, but those who had known him for decades noticed something different. His eyes, which had always moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted the outcome of anything, were still now careful, changed. He went directly to the High Commander's chamber. Vrath was already there waiting. Sewell was there too, standing against the far wall where he had been asked to come, and had arrived before Keth's ship had even docked. General Drath was present, seated, his hands flat on his knees. Several other senior officers stood along the walls. No one spoke when Keth entered. Keth placed the sealed cylinder on the table in front of Vrath and sat down. "Report," said Vrath. So Keth reported. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. He did not rush, he did not simplify. He described the battle in space, the organization, the speed, the human fleet's ability to share information and adjust mid-fight in ways that the Verk had no model for. He described the ground war. He described each of the 11 war singers. Not their deaths, but the moment before each death, the point where each one had encountered something they were not prepared for, something that had no name. In the Verk tactical library, he described the human soldiers, not the officers, not the commanders, the ordinary soldiers. He talked about their faces, the way they looked after days without sleep, still moving, the way they communicated without rank, in the middle of chaos, anyone giving orders to anyone if the orders made sense, the way they treated their own dead quickly with care, and then they kept going. He described a moment on the 7th day when he had come across a group of human soldiers sheltering in a collapsed building. He had expected them to run or to freeze. Instead, the nearest one had looked at him, looked at Keth, who had destroyed cities, and had said something to the others in a calm voice. Then they had moved, not away, into new positions, ready to fight again in under 3 seconds. They were afraid, Keth said. I could see it. They were afraid, and they acted anyway, every single time, all of them. He paused. We train our soldiers to suppress fear, to remove it as a factor. The humans do not suppress it, they use it. They feel it fully and they move anyway, and the result is that they are always present in the fight in a way our soldiers are not. Our snorts soldiers fight with discipline, the humans fight with everything they have. The room was very still. The war singers are gone, said General Drath. His voice was careful. Yes, said Keth. The Armada reduced by approximately 68%. The remaining ships withdrew in good order. The human fleet did not pursue beyond their own system. Drath leaned forward. They did not pursue. No. They stopped at the edge of their system and held position. Keth looked at the cylinder on the table. They were not interested in chasing us. That was never what they wanted. Drath reached for the cylinder. He examined it for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a folded document and a small data chip. He unfolded the document first. He read it slowly. His expression did not change, but his breathing slowed. He read it again. Then he passed it to Sewell. Sewell read it. He read it twice, and then he set it down carefully on the table and pressed his hands flat against it for a moment, as if he needed to feel that it was real. The document was a peace offer. Not a list of demands, not a declaration. A victory, a peace offer written in plain language translated into 4 different Verk dialects to make sure the meaning was clear. And GT snorts. And GT, the humans acknowledged that a war had taken place. They acknowledged their own losses in numbers. They stated clearly that they had not started the conflict and had no interest in continuing it. Their terms were 3. First, the Verk Dominion would withdraw all assets from the Sol system and agree to a defined boundary zone that neither side would cross without prior communication. Second, formal recognition of humanity as a sovereign species entitled to make contact with other civilizations without Dominion interference. Third, the release of 3 species currently held in Dominion processing facilities who had been neighbors to the human system and who the humans had apparently known about before the war began. That was all. No tribute, no territory. No demand for the dismantling of the Dominion's military or the surrender of its leadership, no revenge. 3 things, all of them reasonable. None of them designed to humiliate. Sewell looked up. They could have asked for anything, he said. The room had changed since he had last spoken in it. The last time he had raised his hand. This chamber, 2/3 of the people in it had been quietly laughing at him. None of them were laughing now, after destroying the 3rd Claw Fleet, after holding off the Obliteration Armada, after taking 11 war singers off the table. He shook his head slowly. They could have walked to this table with a list of systems they wanted, and we would have had to sit here and read it. Instead, they asked for a line they can stand behind and 3 species who can't speak for themselves. He paused. Do you understand now? Do you understand why I was afraid of them? No one answered. No one needed to. Vrath picked up the data chip and handed it to a technician who loaded it onto the room's display. It opened into a star map, a complete detailed map of Verk space, every system the humans had identified, every fleet position, every resource station. Accurate, all of it accurate. They had the map, they had the technology, they had the will. And they had sent a peace offer. Vrath stood for a long time with his hands behind his back looking at the map. He thought about 3,000 years, about 43 civilizations, about the way the Dominion had grown, world by world, species by species, always moving forward because nothing had ever been able to stop them. He thought about a small blue planet that had never asked to be found. He picked up the document. He walked to the signing desk at the side of the room, the one that had not been used in living memory because the Dominion had not signed agreements as an equal in centuries. He looked at it for a moment. Then he sat down and he signed. No speech, no ceremony. He signed and set the pen down and looked at no one. The room let out the breath it had been holding. Later on Earth, in a city that was still half rebuilt after the war, a girl of about 8 years old sat on a doorstep, watching the night sky. The stars were brighter than usual. The city's lights were still not fully restored. Her mother's brother was walking toward her down the street, still in his uniform, a bag over his shoulder. He had been gone for almost a year. She ran to meet him, and he caught her and lifted her and held on for a moment, longer than usual. What were they like? She asked when he set her down. The aliens. He thought about that for a moment. He thought about 11 days of fighting, about the friends he had buried, about standing in a ruined city watching something that had destroyed entire worlds walk away carrying a message he hoped would end all of it. He looked down at his niece's face, round and serious, and looking up at him. He smiled. Surprised, he said. She frowned, surprised by what? He took her hand and started walking toward the house. By us, he said. They were surprised by us. She thought about this very seriously. The way small children think about things they do not yet have the words to ask fully. Were you surprised by them? She asked. He looked up at the stars again for a moment, at the vast, dark, enormous space that had turned out to be full of things looking back at them. A little, he said honestly, but not in the same way. They went inside and the door closed, and the stars continued their slow turn. Overhead, the same as they always had. Only now they meant something different than they had a year ago. The Verk Dominion, which had never signed a peace as the smaller power at the table, had done exactly that. It would take decades for the full meaning of it to settle across the galaxy. Other species would hear the story, some would not believe it, some would ask for proof, and proof would be given: records of the battle, the terms, the treaty, and the detail that would be told and retold. The part that seemed to confuse and silence every species that heard it was not the battle, it was not the weapons or the numbers or the 11 war singers. It was the terms that after all of it the humans had only asked for 3 things, and 2 of them were for someone else. No one in the galaxy had ever done that before. No one forgot it after.